Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies, where today is going to be a very interesting day, as it is each and every single, let's say, month here this year at Talk Junkies. Last podcast I did was with Pat Hall, and I didn't get a chance to upload it. We talked about just everything that was on the ballot in Missouri. Elections have already came and gone. There's still some important information in there that Pat talked about with the Missouri Freedom Initiative, the grassroots movement here in Missouri from Pat. I'm sorry I didn't get that up, Pat. It just, life happens and it gets crazy. But the podcast I did before that with Indy was Exiting the Matrix. And Indy, thank you for coming on the show. I know that you and I need to chat again and have another conversation. And we will do that. But today's podcast is going to be very interesting, as I've had this guest on multiple times before, talking about books and exiting or entering the Matrix, or just the Matrix in general. And as we see the world get crazier and crazier, I think we all have questions that we would like to be answered. And I don't necessarily know if there are answers, but if there are answers, this gentleman, Howdie Mickoski, joining today, might be able to shed some light. Howdy, how you doing, man?
Hey, good to see you. I'm mostly all right. This was a very challenging book for me to write. It's my original plan was I would maybe have it out in August, but it was 3 months delayed. There was hard work to do to put this one out, but I think we have the next step in the process to share with people now. So yeah, we can have a chat about it.
No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, man. And as challenging as it was, is it a relief to kind of just be done with it? And is there more to come?
Um, Well, I mean, at this point now, I'm going to complete a few interviews. I'm doing like about 5 interviews with people like yourself that I've known really well, and when we've had some interviews in the past, I'm going to take a few weeks in December to just be still, go into a bit of a retreat, and just sit in some stillness, and then come out in January and see where I go from there. But it's good that at least it's available. I said I wanted this book done no later than Christmas, but I really wanted it out before the US election, and I did manage to get it out. And so uh, it's yeah, we'll see what people say, because it's a very different book than the last one. Now, Exit the Cave, I had to write a particular way to talk about the soul trap, reincarnation, and really to get into over the idea that the majority of people have, that this is a place of love, that God cares about you, and it's a school of learning, and these kind of ideas that needed to be kind of shaken. This book, though, is moving in a more of a direction where my book previous to that, which was Falling for Truth, where I discussed my um, work with testing reality, my experience of emptiness in the canyon. A lot of these realizations are now, these two books are moving together into something very different. So Empty the Cave is going to be, I think, very different than maybe what people might expect.
For sure. So you've kind of gathered. I mean, I feel like you're getting more popular, if that's the word, or more people are catching on to your work and your books and your philosophy. Um, how do you feel, real quick, before we get into the book? How do you feel about that? Like, that it is gaining more attention and more people are opening up to the idea of a false reality, and kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say in the last certainly 2 to 3 years, there's been the idea of a reincarnation trap is not new. It's been around for a long time, but it was very obscure. There were a couple of books written on that subject, like around 1990. Wayne Bush started his Trick by the Light website, I think around 2000 or 2001. But for some reason, as these last 4 years have gone on, and the insanity of reality has been more on display for people personally. Well, before 20, 30 years ago, it was on their TV screen. The insanity was happening somewhere else. Now, all of a sudden, for the world, it was happening where they live. And I think that was really the change, was people started wondering, what's going on here? How did it get like this? And it began an examination for some people who'd had a philosophical bent, um, to look into that. Now, for me personally, I kind of look at somebody said, well, why are you still writing these books and whatever? I wrote this because I kind of feel like I'm a bit of a voice for the segment of the world's population who's kind of never had one. There's a, the world for thousands of years has been told to believe these ideas, right? God is love. This is a school of learning. Everything's wonderful. You should be grateful. Have trust in a savior. But a lot of people had experiences that were the complete opposite of that, but they had nowhere to go. There was no voice for them where they could kind of pick up something, read a book, hear something, and say, yeah, actually, I kind of agree with this person over here. So even though what I say is challenging, and of course, as you know, I say all the time, these are all just my opinions. These are just my presentation of my experiences and my research over 30 years. And I'm sharing it not to get people to believe it necessarily. I'm sharing it to get people to think. I'm sharing it to get people to step back and say, what in this information might possibly be true? How can I go look and check for myself? How important is it for me to check for myself? So that's really where I'm at, and we're about ready to. Yeah, the world's going to get a bit stranger, and everybody needs to have their antidote ready for dealing with it.
For sure. So let's just take it back. I mean, we can get into the first chapters or however you want to do it, but I guess I got just a real quick question, and maybe we can get into to all those things. Like when you go back to the Cathars and the Gnostics, and we talk about the ideas of what they all shared together. How close do you think that they were to maybe exiting the Matrix, or were they persecuted by the Catholics before they could actually obtain the goals that they had?
Um, Again, my opinion, because we really don't know, we know very little about either of those groups,
Right.
right? Very little survived. We were lucky to get some texts of the Gnostics. There's almost no texts of the Cathars, so we have almost nothing from them directly. It's kind of indirect information. Um, what I've come, there's been some revelations that I've had in the last year, and we can talk about what those are. And the book is kind of based on these sort of complete overturning of certain ideas. One of them is the understanding, for me anyway, of what is exiting the matrix. Like that sort of tends to be, you brought that up. But what even is that? And when I wrote the book, I was curious. I thought I'll go take a look. What does a lot of people on the internet say? What is the standard presentation of what they mean by exiting the matrix? And if you look carefully, usually it has something to do with how your form will function in material reality. That's usually what it means, right? It usually relates to something like being more in nature, getting rid of your TV and your smartphone, having less fear, fixing the government, changing the financial system. It might be energy related, raising your vibration, loving more, being your best, taking authority for your actions. That's usually how it's presented. It's something that your physical form will get benefit from for doing. And the catch is presented really well by a gentleman named Gary Harmon. And he said, if you accept this world as an illusion, but don't include yourself in that illusion, you have made the classic spiritual mistake. And that's where I see exiting the matrix is heading. Exiting the matrix is about two complete opposite sides. And this is where I had problems for a long time because I'd had both of these realizations and I was fighting them. So one side is to see it's a matrix, it's a soul trap, it's a place of an evil created deity harvesting us for energy, and that it's basically a realm that will never get better. It will never improve. That's one side. We can talk about that. But the other side is having to recognize that the whole reality is, while an experience, is also a complete illusion. The realization of emptiness is not exiting that's how it's described in Buddhism. It's slightly different terms in Advaita and some other traditions, but you'll find it in every tradition has this idea of emptiness or this idea of seeing the no self. It was very present in Hezekiah Orthodox Christianity, which is Hezekiah means is Greek for stillness. From that famous desert fathers from 2,000 years ago. And so we put it this way. It's a seeing that only something can be contained because what can contain emptiness? So both of these seeings must happen. So to kind of finally get back to your question, if somebody only has one of these two sides and roots their understanding in only one side, it's incomplete. It's only half. So not a lot, there are several people through history who've had an experience, a complete realization of emptiness, often in, like I say, Eastern traditions or other Western mystical traditions. But if you don't also see the trap, if you don't also see the way this has been created, how it's been created, what's been created to do, you will be tricked. If you see that this is a trap and you see it all completely and you see the matrix and you see the false reality, but you still think that you're real, there's still something for you, the person, to get in this reality, well, you're going to definitely get tempted and tricked there. When these two are able to be brought together into a place of total stillness, there's a the idea when that gets presented to people, usually when it presents the idea of emptiness, it always tends to be scary for people. And of course, it's scary for the egoic personality. That's all. Because on the other side of that gateway, which is where emptiness is totality. It's nothing and it's everything at the same time. But the egoic mind only wants to focus on the nothing side of it to try to make it scary because it knows if your awareness crosses that boundary over to what emptiness is, ego can't make it. So I'll say the last comment and then you can begin your questions. And that is one of the key reminders of my book is nothing false can exit the matrix. Only that which is true can exit the matrix. One, if your totality is still holding on to one tiny bit of false, you won't get out.
And I think
That's the path.
well, there's a quote in your book that resonated with me, and it was false is always changing while the real is still. And I forget who had that quote in your book, but that kind of moved me a little bit. And I don't know if I truly even understand. I mean, I understand that false is always changing. It has to, but real is still. And you know what I'm saying? Is that kind of go hand in hand with the emptiness? Is that real is empty?
Yes, and again, the word is challenging because it it doesn't really. It's just a metaphor to describe the experience. Now, before I had my realization of emptiness, for example, the things that were written about it didn't make any sense. I had a conceptual idea, kind of what it is, but um, you kind of only when you have it does it kind of make sense. And then all you can do is kind of prepare yourself. And we can talk about this with getting your house in order and how you prepare your mind for dealing with that experience. But one of the elements of, or some might call it the void. That's another word for it, right? It's it's still. Now, still does not mean the absence of sound or noise or intense quiet. It means a place where it is not being a place of not being disturbed. That is the greatest way I could describe it. So the form, this thing, you and me, we could be running, talking, jumping, there could be loud music around, but you can still be in complete stillness. And again, it's one of these many spiritual tricks that have been played on people. They've taken the stillness idea and told people, well, you have to sit down, close your eyes, and be quiet and like stare at a wall or something for 5 hours a day because that's how you find stillness. And there's value in that, but that's not stillness. That's quiet. Quiet is a starting point to examine who and what you are. But actual stillness is the totality. And stillness has nothing to do with the thing here. So, yeah.
Okay, so then let's get into emptiness a little bit more. I know it's complex and it's hard for people to grasp, but you look at the ladder and you look at the lives that we live, and it's chaotic. It's chaos. It's hurt, pain, struggle. There are good things in it as well, but that's part of the trap or part of tricking us into believing in our egos. And I wouldn't tell people to try mushrooms, but mushrooms for me, I had to face my ego, and I don't, psychedelics. We've went into that before. I'm not trying to bring that up again. Why is it so hard for people to grasp emptiness? Is it because culturally, like you talk about in the book, you get into certain TV shows and you kind of, you bring those up as examples, but why is emptiness so hard for us to comprehend? And why would, I guess, the divine spark make it that way? And maybe they didn't because of the false realm or what have you, but why is it so hard to access and to find? Or is it maybe even that hard?
Let's put it this way. The great challenge is even the idea of the word to awaken. So it indicates there's something sleeping. And it's always brought back to me. I'm somehow asleep to this world and I have to wake up and see whatever. But when you bring in this idea of what the Gnostics called the divine spark, which is this element of completeness that is outside of the matrix, that was brought into this creation in order to make it live, simplified. And you recognize that that is linked to the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty, because the divine spark is always presented in feminine terms. It was first presented as Sophia. That's how the Gnostics describe it. First, they didn't use the word divine spark. It was Sophia, who was within you, the goddess. And then it began to be called a divine spark, but it's always feminine. So Sleeping Beauty is the divine spark in the coma. And that's what we have to recognize. It's not Howdie that ever had to wake up. Howdie had to be a vehicle to get Sleeping Beauty to wake up, to get the thing back there. If we put it in Matrix terms of the movie, Neo Anderson in the Matrix movie, who's functioning and working on his computer, has the job, dealing with Mr. Smith, that thing didn't need to awaken. The Neo in the pod, who had all of the things attached to him, that is what had to awaken and recognize that the Neo Anderson he had been following was a projection out of his own mind. It's not exactly awakening, but it's a helpful metaphor to recognize that it's not this thing, it's that thing back there. That's what needs to awaken, and we have to look at ourselves in that in the idea of the myth of the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. We are like the prince in that story. The prince goes through a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of challenges to get to the castle where Sleeping Beauty resides. And what's important is we have to become the kind of prince Sleeping Beauty wants to wake up for. Sleeping Beauty doesn't want to wake up for some jackass who's going to take that energy and just screw with it in the rest of this reality, right? She's looking for integrity and honesty and courage and strength and intellect. She's looking for that. That's what she's looking for. So when you look at what you might call spiritual-ish tradition / self-help / transformation, if you realize what those are really meant to be doing is to create the form as the prince that your divine spark wants to awaken for, then it kind of all starts to make sense what's going on and what you're doing. Because once that gets awakened and once that gets repowered, so your energy doesn't have to be accessed from out there, from the matrix, which is how we normally run. We work somehow to get energy from there, we bring it in here, we do something, and we move it back out. It's this constant cycle where it's energy and it's matrix. We want to get our power from that which we truly are, the divine spark. Once that is powered, we don't need this anymore. It's only that. So it becomes it's a complete 180-degree turn to start recognizing what, in my opinion, exiting the matrix really means. It's that exits the matrix. This will never exit the matrix. This is matrix, right? The form is just a car that the divine spark can potentially drive. And just like when we drive our car, it's nice to use it. We go somewhere, we get what we need, we come home, we park the car, and we forget about it until we need the car again for something else. That's the kind of relationship we want with the divine spark, where the divine spark is able to borrow the form for what it needs from the standpoint of operational activities within this projected reality. but we don't want to think that we are the car, and the car is the thing that's important. It's the thing that's driving the car.
For sure. So, do you think that you have maybe accessed the divine spark? Is that something that you're able to do while you're in this form? And I know it's complex and the things that you have to do to be able to achieve maybe understanding or being a part of the divine spark. I guess what I'm saying is, have you ever personally maybe witnessed it or seen it? Because I guess a question of mine would be, Howdy, when you talk about emptiness and stillness, or just emptiness, right? And this might be a bad way of looking at it. You just tell me, when you go to sleep and when you dream, and I know that they say you dream all the time, but there are times when you sleep and you wake up and you're like, man, like that was quick, like nothing happened. I didn't have any dreams. Is that maybe is that maybe what the divine spark is? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that.
I know what you're asking. It's on the direction of emptiness, because there's no experiencer. So it's in the direction. It's not exactly the same, but it's in that movement. Um, yes, there are some people that I know personally have also experienced exactly their divine spark, their reawakening of it. I had an intensive in Denmark in the summer, and in the course of what we were doing there on the first night, 6 or 7 people experienced it. And what was interesting is they all described it in very similar terms. They all said the experience was very similar for them, and that was a feeling of heat in their chest, but and like intense heat, but it created no sweating. There was no discomfort. It was just like their body was filled with some of them called it like a radiant heat. And this is not like Kundalini. This is not like, which is a part of the chakra system and another part of the whole trick. Because everything in this realm, here's why it is so difficult to figure out anything here. As soon as any little possible piece of information might get out into the matrix of use, the demiurge will find it and start distorting it. You don't need to get rid of stuff. You don't need to get rid of anything true. And you don't need to, all you need to do is take it and start distorting it. Start distorting it. Because a lie is rather easy to see, but a distorted truth, very, very difficult. And unfortunately, that's what most religions and spiritual traditions have become over the last several thousand years. They started with something really pure at their core. And then over time, another distortion, another distortion, another distortion. And now you've got this thing where you can unravel the layers of the onion. But to get to that core is so difficult. So another way of looking at it is like this reality from our examination is like a series of Russian nesting dolls. And just when you think you've got that list all figured out, you open the doll and there's another doll inside of it. Then you work on that, there's another doll inside of that. There's a layer upon a layer upon a layer. And that's what's so difficult, because certain layers eventually get seen. And it's like, oh, I've got it. I figured it all out. But you have to realize, oh, there's another level below that, another level below that. That it's just, in Zen terms, they call it a turtle on top of a turtle on top of a turtle on top of a turtle. And so that's what's so challenging, is that you see through a layer and you think you've done great. My Korean teacher, my Korean monk teacher, used to tell us when we sort of had an epiphany or some sort of felt we had a great realization, and he would say, "Yes, that's great. Enjoy that for a week or two." What do you mean enjoy it for a week or two? So, next thing will be coming after that. And of course, he was always right. We thought, oh, we're done. We figured everything out. And then 2 weeks later, oh boy, what am I looking at now? And so that's why it does require a lot of courage and a lot of honesty and a lot of preparation for exiting the matrix. Again, I see that term thrown around, and it's again another one of the things that gets thrown out so much with that is this. It's like wishful thinking. I'm going to wish my way out of the matrix. If I just wish hard enough, if I just focus my beliefs hard enough, I'll get out. And when you begin to see the level of lies and distortion and layers of this realm, that's when you finally begin to see it requires a very different pathway. And the pathway is this way, not that way.
And then that's very interesting, and I think we've talked about it before. And I'm not. I know what you're describing. It's very challenging, but at the end of the day, I feel like, with all the things that are thrown at us and just the everyday life of whatever, if you want to call it Western society or Western culture, which is where I live, so that's what I'm voicing my opinions off of. There's a lot of factors that go into that. That you have to. You know what I'm saying? You have entertainment, you have sports, you have movies, you have TV shows, you have just the everyday rat race that you are engaged in, and sometimes like I look back and I look at someone who's homeless and I'm like, and not to say that being homeless would get you closer to the divine spark or what have you. I'm just like, maybe they are closer because and to your point, they're not in tune with nature or anything like that. They're looking this way and not that way, like you just said. And maybe they're not. Maybe they're addicted to drugs or alcohol or what have you. But the everyday rat race makes it tough to try and challenge yourself to find the divine spark. And most people will never even seek it. When you talk about, and you suggest that maybe 0.5% of the population has access to the divine spark, and I'm venturing out to say that maybe I'm in that percentage, a lot of those people aren't even seeking it. They're seeking the ego. They're seeking the materialistic world that we live in. So I think that that's a challenge in itself as well.
Yeah, so it begins with two elements. For anyone who says, I think I might want to try this. I think I might want to see what might be true about me. Well, there's two fairly grounded elements. This conversation has maybe sounded a bit above ground, but actually it's not. It's a very grounded thing. One part of that is self-definition, which is a whole process of figuring out who and what you are. But that begins with something that my favorite teacher talked about, Richard Rose, which he called getting your house in order. To those who hear it, it sounds very unspiritual. I'm going to describe it now, and people say, "Oh, I'm not doing spiritual work if I'm doing that." Actually, you are. It's core foundational work, and it's going right into what was just said. The end result of getting your house in order is having a mind that is still, calm, and I don't want to call healed, we'll call it transformed of all of your trauma. Because if the mind is still dealing with trauma, still is a shattered, difficult experience, should you ever get the opportunity to walk across death, you might say, into emptiness, the mind will recoil. The egoic mind will not allow that to happen. It's actually a very good thing about the ego, because the ego is saying, unless I'm healed and unless I'm whole, we're not going past this. So actually, it's saying that's your first step. Transform and heal the mind. But before we can even really get to the mind, well, we have to work with the vehicle which we feel the mind is attached to. So literally so you're talking about people that are homeless and whatnot. Getting your house in order means you have control of your energy system. That's first and foremost. The energy system that you call your body and you call your physical form, that's where the driving energy for the prince to find an awake sleeping beauty comes from. So we need to get this thing running as best as we can. So as an example, if let's say you're someone is sick and you have an illness, well, that's actually spiritual work, because as we know, when we are ill, it takes up a tremendous amount of energy and time that we have to try to focus in to getting ourselves to the next level of functioning. That's spiritual work, because the more you heal, the more energy you'll have available, the less you'll have to focus on that. All of these things, you have to look at your addictions. Like, if someone really wants to awaken the divine spark, they have to say, well, is drinking, smoking, taking drugs, playing video games, whatever your addictions are, is that a good use of my time and energy for waking my divine spark? If you're overweight, well, that's going to use up a lot of energy. Any of these things that we can classify as an addiction can be first dealt with, and it doesn't seem spiritual. Like, on the surface, you would say, well, I'm not doing this meditation, I'm not swimming with dolphins, I'm not. but you're doing the stuff that all those people are avoiding. They're not any further along than you. They're just in a denial and ignoring core work. Another piece of core work is having your life structured so that you're not living in a state of anxiety. Now, that will be different for different people. Some people might need a 9 to 5 job and a decent apartment, and that's what they need to feel safe and secure. Others need different things, but it's important that one way or another, you are at a point where you get up and you feel like, I don't have to think about my base survival needs today, unless one or two people, of course, will say, the best thing for me is to live in the forest with an axe and a knife and just literally. But then again, it's like, you better know how to handle yourself out there and how to totally survive 100%. That for that person, that would be having their house in order then. So all of these things are very, very important to have this base foundational, very grounded way of being. Richard Rose used to make his students come out to his farm. If they were going to have like a big retreat, well, the retreat would be on the weekend, but everyone's going to come out on Monday and they're going to fix his fence and they're going to dig holes and they're going to get their hand in the soil and they're going to chop down some trees because he wants them literally rooted here. He doesn't want them flying away. He doesn't want them. He wanted before the real spiritual work started, that you were here, you were present, and you were energetically ready for the next stage. So to me, that's a really important part, because if you have that, if you have your house in order and your mind is clear, when you go to emptiness, the experience won't be so bad. It'll
So,
be challenging, it'll be confusing, but you'll handle. If your mind is not ready and your body's not ready for that, you can come back shattered.
so
And
would
so some people walking around pushing shopping carts and talking to themselves, they may have actually experienced emptiness, but they weren't prepared for it, and now they just don't function anymore.
right. So, do you think that the divine spark and the matrix maybe communicate with each other, or have at some point?
So let's put the metaphor into these terms to maybe help everyone kind of explore what I mean by a divine spark. So in Gnostic terminology, in Gnostic, um, we'll call it creation mythology is the best way of describing it. They talk about, as most cultures, ancient cultures do, that there was an original creator. And this is very interesting, that when you look into creation myths, no matter what creation myth you're looking at, it's never one creation they're talking about. They're talking about two different creations. This is very important. There was the initial creation of a type of absolute. Sometimes they'll call it a father, sometimes they'll call it a combined father mother. And this father mother began manifesting, usually filaments of light is a really good way of describing it. For various reasons, depending on the tradition, something goes wrong, there's an error, there's a creature created who decides to create on its own in a way that is not supposed to. Our demiurge creates the matrix. That's the second creation. So even if you read Genesis in the Bible, you're actually getting two different creations being talked about in that segment. And so it can be very confusing if you don't know which one you're describing. So we have the demiurge creates the matrix. Call it Lucifer, call it Yaldabaoth, Rex Monday, whatever you want to call it. It starts to create a type of AI simulacra here. I don't use the word simulation anymore. I use the word simulacra. It's a much more exact description of where we are. And the problem was nothing had life. Nothing could move. He was copying from something from this perfect pleroma, but none of his creations lived. So he had to, depending on the story, either it was borrowed to come in, or it was the life force was tricked to come in. One way or another, this was what I classify as the celestial fire. The complete power of life from the pleroma. It comes in. As soon as it comes in, the demiurge decides, I can't let it get out, because if the fire gets out, there'll be no life anymore. So it shuts the exit way, you might say, tricks the celestial fire, breaks it up into many sparks. So this is very important, breaks it up into many individual sparks. And it's these sparks which have been, we'll say, put into a coma. They're very similar metaphorically to Neo Anderson in the pod now. They're asleep and they're running the matrix, running a constant projection into this reality. So it leads us to a problem. The problem is when someone says we are all one. This reality, it's all oneness, it's all unity. Again, we had two creations, there are two onenesses. This is my next great revelation. So there is a oneness, which is all of the divine sparks, which if they combine back together becomes the one of the celestial fire, which is that which will exit the matrix. That's one. Then you have everything else. The world of objects, experiences, projections, ideas, etheric realm, astral realm, demonic realm, angel realm. That's that's one of the matrix. And the great miscalculation happens when someone says, and if they're saying, trying to refer to something deeper, I am one with everything, or I am one with the table and one, and they've been tricked. They've been tricked because now something which is not this one, the matrix one, which is the fire one, have been put together, and lo and behold, that true oneness has been lost to the oneness of the matrix. It happens in the scene where Neo takes the pill. So Neo is given two pills. He's given a blue pill representing the matrix, representing water. Water is the symbolic presentation in the ancient world of this matrix reality. Because actually, from the standpoint of, it goes to the myth of Narcissus and seeing his projection in the water and falling in love with it, the way water is a conductor and moves sound and vibration. It's a very long explanation as to why water represents the matrix. And then we have the red pill, which is fire. The Cathars were very clear that they rejected John the Baptist because he was a baptizer of water. They only accepted Christ because he was a baptizer of fire. So here in this place, the Morpheus creature gives Neo the two pills. Which do you want? Okay, he chooses the red pill, so he's saying he chooses fire. What does he do?
He awakens. He awakens.
Yes. How does he take it?
He swallows it.
He swallows it with water.
Oh, shit.
He uses a glass of water. So he put the fire out, the potential he had to see the totality of what he was, and he again took it with the water of the matrix, which means the matrix will always cancel out. False will override truth in this particular realm. And so the whole rest of the Matrix trilogy, the whole rest of the story is about him in the Matrix. He never got out.
Oh, my goodness.
Because he's made that classic mistake.
That's deep. But do they communicate
How
their
about
ideas?
how about this metaphor for people? No, it's the same thing. The story of Christ walking on water. Now, people like to think that story, that presentation, is somehow showing he's a divine being and that the world of gravity and whatever doesn't affect him. But if you see that water is representing the matrix, what that means is he's not ever sinking into the matrix. He's not ever being fooled by the matrix. He's literally able to be in the fire state. So therefore, to constantly be apart from the matrix. Now that metaphor, at least in my eyes, is unbelievably powerful as to what it's describing.
So would that almost play into Moses being able to separate water as well? Or, he moves it. So these people, or these metaphors back in ancient times, they were able to be outside of the matrix. But how can they still exist outside of the matrix as a divine spark if it's empty?
Well, it's the divine sparks are in the matrix.
Okay.
Right. We're in it.
Right.
And the job our first job is, you might say, awaken that spark so it starts powering itself, no longer the matrix, and begins to rejoin with its true beloved, which is the celestial fire. We've been taught this story of we're incomplete, we're only a half, and we need to search in this world for a soulmate, for someone who's going to fix us and make us whole. And again, they've managed to distort the search that way, as opposed to the search is that way for the divine spark to be awakened and reunite with its beloved, the celestial fire.
So
When we begin to see that everything needs to be turned 180 degrees around, it all starts to make sense. It's just the opposite of what we've always thought.
right. And I think what's scary about whenever you talk about emptiness and the divine spark, and I think what's scary about that is that people would think that they, not necessarily your physical body, but even your consciousness, that divine spark would no longer exist. But I think what you're saying is you still exist, but in harmony, or I don't know. Like, can you kind of explain whenever, let's say, and I know you've never made it that far, but whenever you talk about metaphors and Jesus is able to walk on water or Moses is able to separate water, they've found their way outside of it, but they still exist, I guess is what I'm saying. So people will still exist. It doesn't you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Again, the awakening of the divine spark has nothing to do with you.
Right.
That's the challenging thing. And that's again where these spiritual traditions get themselves into trouble and they turn these ideas into a what's in it for you.
Right.
The thing we see in the mirror. What's in it for me, which is, of course, what the average person is coming for. The average person is suffering and in pain, and they're looking for something to feel better. Makes sense. And these great traditions are promising them, oh, this idea you're reading about in these books, this idea of emptiness, yes, it's wonderful, it's still, it's complete, and let me tell you how it will help you. The truth of it is, though, emptiness will take away everything and it will give you nothing.
Yeah.
But you still want it.
Yeah.
Now, the wording, it's a trick of the wording, right? It will give you no thing. The mind takes that to mean it will give you nothing. It will give you no thing. That's a very different description of the wording. And again, only that which is not the mind will be able to understand it.
So the mind knows how to understand what not existing means. Is that a good way to ask it?
In a sense, right, what we've talked about, because no thing is also totality. It's everything. There are two sides of the coin. If somebody technically has a complete unity experience, they've also touched one side of emptiness. And both, again, like everything, while you're still in the matrix, everything is dual. And both sides of the coin always have to be seen and brought together. It's just the something or the unity side of emptiness, that's the fun side. So you don't have to talk about that too much. Everybody likes that side. So great, they're all going, but they kind of don't want to have to deal with the nothing side of it. The realization that, hey, wait a minute, how do I know who and what I am? And it's only scary for this thing, right? What's called the dark night of the soul. John of the Cross, famous Christian mystic who wrote that fabulous text in the 1700s. It's not a dark night of the soul. It's a dark night of the ego. It's the egoic individual personality self that gets terrified when it starts to get to cross that line and realize, holy smokes, this awareness we're going to find out that awareness exists and I don't. So ego is going to hold on because the whole time we've been here, it's been trying to tell us why we need it, why it's so important. And as we talked about maybe in our first talk way back when I had the experience of the canyon and I died in that river, and I was at that moment of literally, I know I'm dying, thought was gone. Like it just vanished. And there was no possible way to even get back and track it. And there was this deep realization of you would think at the moment you would most require your thought to try to, stay alive, it's literally gone. And it was like, oh yeah, right. It's been tricking me all this time into how important it is. And at that moment, here I am sitting in this total awareness that doesn't even need to think. It just knows. It just, whatever it needs to know, it knows. And it just presents the knowing as is required in the moment. It's like, yeah, why haven't I been using this my whole life? you know? But we live in this very bizarre, trapping reality that gets us focused on the Neo in the Matrix and is getting us to forget that it's back there. And really we're just something that back there wants to use to um, navigate through this particular experience. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like new agey because it's not.
Right.
But yeah.
But do you think that, so wouldn't the divine spark at some point, and I know these are all theoreticals, right? Wouldn't it try and face the false god or the demiurge and try and get rid of it? Because if that's the case, Howdy, and we all have this opportunity, and that's even if I have a divine spark, if I'm able to get back to that divine spark, the demiurge or whatever it is you want to call it would always want to trick us back into this realm, no matter what. It would be an ongoing, continuous thing that just never stops. You know what I'm saying? Because this is what it wants, and this is what it needs to thrive and exist. Why wouldn't, and I know this is a hard question to answer, why wouldn't the divine spark just get rid of the demiurge or the false god or whatever it is?
I would say once something is truly awake, it knows that nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be changed here. It's again a famous Richard Rose quote. He said, once you've reached your totality, you can move mountains. It's just you realize you don't need to because the mountains are exactly where they're supposed to be. It's this kind of idea that we're seeing wrongness from where we are. Or let's put it this, we see insanity from where we are. That's the best way to describe it. The realm is insane. Like everything about this place is insane on all levels. The problem is that we have been given the belief that it's supposed to be sane and wonderful and loving. So something is wrong with the world. Therefore, once you get that idea, it's like, well, I got to fix it. God made a mistake somehow, and I need to fix it in order to get it back to the loving, wonderful place it was supposed to be. The great seeing is when we get to the point of like, it was built to be insane. It was built to be a suffering trap. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And it can't really be fixed. So when we begin to see that the whole thing is designed to suck our energy into trying to fix it, which how many trillions of prayers have gone to God to have world peace? How many loving sitting meditations have happened over the course of thousands of years? The realm never gets any better. And here's the sad part, it never will. This place will never, ever get better. It only gets worse and worse and worse. It literally will constantly sink into the quicksand. What that does, it's not a sad realization, it's actually empowering. When I finally accepted that, I could stop trying to fix the world, stop trying to save anyone, and realize, oh yeah, the only one who ever has to be saved is myself. And once that energy is transformed, you can start transforming a few people around you and your local environment. You have a small sphere of influence. And beyond that, that's all that ever needs to be done. And it becomes this incredible, a calmness just starts to come over you because it's all now not my responsibility. That's where we get, again, this weird religious spiritual trap that, it's insane, it's crazy, and somehow it's your job to fix it. And people will spend 10 years trying, burn themselves out badly, and then wonder, what did I just do for 10 years? And so what's the George Carlin quote? If you think there's a solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah. The guy was brilliant.
Honestly, it's freeing. It's one of the most freeing experiences of realizations I've ever had, to realize not only do I not have to fix it, it can't be fixed. Oh, it's because it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's built to be insane. Wow. It's like trying to turn a video game that's about golf and turn it into a video game about cars. It's just not gonna, that's not what it's built for. It was built for something else. So if you don't want to play the game, that's the golf video game, if you want something else, then the answer is just, well, just get rid of the golf game. Just, it doesn't need to be destroyed. Just, I'm just not going to play that anymore. And that's kind of the message of where I guess parts of the book are going. It's just seeing through what this place really is, and then just recognizing I'm not interested in that game anymore. I'm not interested in being a part of it, but I don't need to change it to some other game. It's just I'm tired of this game. I played this movie enough times, and it's just time to be done.
But I hear you on that. But you almost think, like, we go back to my very first question on the Gnostics and the Cathars, and you see that there's very little scripture written about them, and some of it may be speculation, and we have what we have to reference them for what we have. And does it ever scare you that, if you start awakening other people around you in small communities, that the Matrix would potentially attack you, and then they would distort what is your information and turn you into a bad guy to where people don't want to listen to you or think that you're crazy. The Matrix has everything up its sleeve. Again, like you talked about, it got Neo to drink the red pill with water. You know what I'm saying? So there's only so much that you can do, and I understand that you are at peace with who you are, but eventually the Matrix is going to find that, and it's going to try and rewrite that program or whatever it is.
It's doing it already.
What's that like?
It's just interesting. It's surprising to see how it operates, to see how quickly it operates. That's why my recommendation is, if this information is interesting to you, if you think somehow you resonate with what I say, go pick up the book. Like, pick up the book now before 2 years from now, some AI has distorted all the stuff in it and it says something completely different. Like, read it now. Take advantage of what's available now, and always be prepared. I mean, first of all, no matter what I'm writing or saying, I don't have 100% of the truth. I would never say I'm 100% knowledgeable. I've got distortion in what I'm presenting. I've got some distortion in what I've written. I'm trying to share honestly what I see and how I see it, but that doesn't mean I don't think there's distortion. So just like reality, if you pick up my book and you start reading it, you've also got your own task of like, well, where is this Howdie guy got his distortion? Where is he in error? And so it's not just a journey to wonder what I'm presenting. It's a journey to wonder, what do you see? How do you come to get these internal, because a realization is here. It's yours. It's personal. You don't want someone else's ideas. You don't want someone else's experience. You want your own. So how can you take what's mine and kind of say, where would you like to follow with that? Where do you think you want to travel? And what things you're saying, you know what? I'm not going to discount what he says, but I'm going to kind of put that one in the maybe category. Not so sure about that one. We'll put it over here and we'll come back to that and check that out later. And you need to do that with everything. Everything of what you're looking, I mean, literally everything that could have some kind of value. I mean, to the bare, we get down to the most simple thing, right? What should you eat? What should your body eat? How can we be at this stage of our experience of life process of thousands of years, and actually, we can't even agree on what the human body should actually eat? What's the best things for it to eat? Literally, you ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers. How is that even possible? Like, it's an amazing example of the level of distortion. I mean, we got to the point in the last few years when you ask somebody, what's a woman? I don't know. How can you not know? Like, if you imagine going to like a native Indian village in like the 1500s and asking like one of the medicine people or something, I'm not sure what a woman or a man is. They would just look at you like you're insane. Like, that would be like one of the most obvious first things you learn when you're like 4 years old. It would be obvious to them. And so That's how distorted our reality has become, and not by accident, right? I think as it gets crazier and as it sinks deeper and deeper and deeper, more and more people start to figure things out. And so the demiurge has to create more and more and more distortion. And actually, this is again my opinion, I think it's getting so out of control. This reality is getting so out of control. I'm actually not sure the demiurge has complete control over this thing anymore. That literally, I think part of the craziness is like literally he's got 40 holes in the wall and he can only patch 20 at one time. And he's like, I'm trying to figure out what to patch. And so I think we're also at a point where there's literally, what's that metaphor that with there's holes in the dike and the little boy has to keep putting the holes in to stop the water coming. I think we got holes everywhere in this reality. And it doesn't matter where you look, whatever area you look at, it's just wrong. It's just nuts. And it's so obvious now. And it doesn't matter where you go, you've got the opportunities to see through another layer of false.
Yeah. So, and I think for me, just my perception is just based off this conversation for what I can think is life is kind of weird, like obviously you grow, you're a newborn, then you're a child, then you're a young adult. And then, I'm 35 and I would say that I just stepped into adulthood and whatever that means, just having these types of conversations and challenging myself to understand what all of this is. For me, I almost
Sure.
look at it like if I'm able to do what you were describing, I almost think that that's the journey of life, and I don't know if you necessarily, I mean, you had an experience, this summer that I necessarily had never had. And I don't know that at some point in your life, let's say you're like 40 and you figure it out and you're able to join the divine spark, if you would actually leave your physical body. And I guess maybe at that point it turns into an NPC and that your vessel still exists. That's some deep stuff, man. Like that's, you know what I'm saying? But I almost feel like that's
Yep.
that's what we have. That's what we are offered to us when we are put back into this realm.
If you simplify the whole process, it just gets down to, at least the way it was for me, is I just wanted to know what was true. I didn't care what it was, and I didn't care really what that meant for me. It was just I was tired of all the insanity surrounding me. I was tired of all the suffering I was constantly experiencing and experiencing of people around me. Like it wasn't just my own suffering, it was the suffering of everybody. And I thought, I got to figure out what this place is. Like, I just don't want to continue going forward if I don't know. So for me, that was the step. It's just I just need to know what the end result of it might be after I know. I wasn't concerned about. Like I had no concern. What might that mean for me? You know, that kind of wasn't part of it. It was there was a real drive of just I gotta somehow figure this out. Um, and so if that's at the back of that's why I called the first chapter the core intent. So if your core intent is you have a direction, whatever that direction is, it doesn't matter what it might be, but whatever it might be, you saying, this is where I want to put the majority of the energy in my life in, then you just do that. And you look at areas then that, well, it's taking up my energy, but if somebody wanted to really become a pro basketball player, and they're 14 years old, it's probably a good idea they put in 8 to 10 hours a day of basketball. It wouldn't be a good idea to put in 8 to 10 hours of, fixing a car. It might be a valuable skill. They might become really good at it, but your NBA career is dying. So it's like anything. You've got to know what is at your deepest core want, or what is your core's deepest desire to want to move towards in this life. And then that has to get the majority of your energy. It takes us back to getting your house in order, because if your house isn't in order and you're leaking a ton of energy in a whole lot of different ways, then you don't even if you know what your direction is, you don't have the energy to put towards it. So it's this balancing act of kind of realizing, well, what's most important to you? Like for some people, they might say, I want to be a great mom or a great dad. That might be somebody saying, I'm not interested in divine spark and exiting a matrix and emptiness. I just want to be a good mom or good dad. Okay, there's a valuable potential tool. If that's your choice, how are you, in a sense, building your your plan in order that the majority of your energy will go into creating that very result. That's really all this is. Mine was just a very unique intent that I had of what I wanted to know about reality. And I put 8 to 10, 12 hours a day into doing that. And eventually, I got careless and I fell in a canyon and I got my answer. But there was 10 years of continuous work and stuff and challenges and difficulty and problems before that. And then there was 10 years of challenges and difficulty and illness and difficulty after that. And, but it's all been worth it. It's all been totally worth it.
Oh, 100%, man. I enjoy these conversations. I know you wanted to keep it right at an hour, and because there's a lot of good information, man. But
Yeah, I mean, if you have another one or two, we're doing okay. So, I mean, if
yeah,
you have something that you really want to ask, please ask it. We'll make sure we
yeah,
don't leave you hanging there.
no, for sure. And I think a deep question that a lot of people probably don't ask themselves is, do you even trust yourself? Do you trust Howdie
Mm,
Mickoski?
no,
No.
definitely not. What, let's say, awareness, the totality that actually was first experienced in Egypt in one of the pyramids, then was fully experienced in the canyon. I trust that totally and fully. But the Howdy thing is different. And the Howdy thing is built to get what's best for the Howdy thing in this particular realm. And that's okay. I mean, it's another thing when people sometimes hear these realizations and they think, oh, well, then you're just going to dissolve or you're just going to ignore the world. And, oh, no, you just come to learn to see that the Howdy thing is an actor in a gigantic movie. And the movie is requiring certain things of the Howdy character to do. And so it's good to get to know how this thing operates so I can get to know what the script is calling for. But I don't ever think the script is like somehow built for my best interest or it's built to it's built to lead me to a destiny or it's built to take me to some sort of happy place or it's built to burn all my karma. It's just a goofball story that's playing out that this character has manifested to be a part of. So I'll play out the story and be a very good watcher of what happens and what when you step off the stage and go into the audience and start watching, the thing people tend to not understand the metaphor is the character doesn't lead the stage. The character you'd always been playing is still on the stage. It still keeps performing in the theater play. It's just your identification is more shifted now to the thing that's watching it in the theater, and you're more getting a curious, interesting watching of what the actor on the stage is doing when before you took everything the actor did as in real seriousness. That's the shift that happens. The character goes on. The character keeps doing its thing. It's just you start focusing on what's in the audience watching it.
Yeah. All right. So this is my last one, and I think you've kind of probably already answered it, but maybe you could go a little bit deeper on it. But when we talk about just the Matrix in its entirety and the simulacra, did I say that right?
Sure.
Um, it almost feels like there's Easter eggs in it. You ever feel that way? I mean, you kind of talk about like in the Bible with Jesus and with Moses, and then now instead of like books of religion and stuff like that, it's movies and TV shows. And I'm almost doing agreement with you that I do think there is a small percentage of the population that is the Archons or part of what the Matrix is, like Agent Smith, that they're involved within our society and they participate with us. So I don't know. Do you think that that they put like hidden Easter eggs in it, or does that even matter?
Um, in a sense, it does. First, so people know what those terms mean, why I've changed the term. Okay, a lot of people, and I use simulation for a long time, but a simulation is generally, if you define it, it's usually something run as an experiment in order for data to be collected. That's a simple term of what a simulation is. There's a there's a purpose for running the thing to get information, and it's possible this is an experiment. I'm not saying it's not, but the word simulacra, which is more linked to the idea of something which exists, which is a copy of something else. That feels that that's more in tune to how ancients, various mythologies describe this world. And what's also interesting about the word simulacra is a simulacra is a copy of an original, but if the original no longer exists, the simulacra becomes the original. It's like if I take a piece of paper and I put it in a photocopier and I photocopy it, and now I have an original and a photocopy. But if I destroy the original, actually the photocopy is now the original. So it makes it quite interesting that we might be the copy of another realm, back to these ideas of resets and all of these ideas with the world fairs and what's been going on with them. But that doesn't mean the thing we're copied from still exists. It might be gone. So we become an original even though we're a copy. So that's why I use that term. Within this reality, yes, the what is outside the matrix from the pleroma has snuck information in here, has snuck various gateways to get out. And like I said, over time, they get distorted. They don't really work the same way. And so new ones have to be created. In the last while, yeah, movies were a big one for somehow things to be shared in that place. If you're looking into a movie metaphor, David and Jennifer in the movie Pleasantville, when they enter into the black and white world, bringing this information of what their reality really is, that's kind of what you're describing. These pieces of information. In Pleasantville, only a small number of the teenagers would listen to them. Originally, the entire adult community wanted to try to run them out of town. But in time, this this knowledge began to just move through the whole community. So there are lots of those things here. The challenge is the older they are, the more likely they're either A, distorted, or B, if they are, let's say, something that's kind of undistortable, a temple, a pyramid, a whatever, they're from so far ago, so many simulacra, so many worlds back, that the way our world functions, this reality, the kind of building blocks is not the same building blocks as theirs. It's why no one will ever figure out how the pyramids of Egypt were built or why, or because they literally aren't from our reality. They're from a different reality with totally different rules, but we're trying to use our rules and our understandings to figure it out. And that's, to me, a real reason why we probably never will.
I think that's a great explanation. And just to finish on that, AI is getting so advanced now to where you can ask AI, hey, show me how the pyramids were built, and they'll come up with a composition of how the AI thinks it was built based upon all the information we've put into the AI. But whenever you think about that, there's got to be a little bit of the matrix pulling into that function. And I think it'll be really interesting in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years on when people ask AI questions on how things were in the past, what it will present to us. And it could be a lie, and it could, it knows, there are firewalls within that system to say, hey, just give them bread and circus still, but it still is interesting.
Soon enough. Well, no, soon. AI controls everything.
Oh yeah.
Right now. People like to think it's in the learning stages, everything is getting prepared. That's just what we're being shown. We're being shown the level of AI from 20, 30, 40 years ago. The way it really is, it's the equivalent of 40 years in the future to us. And it's making all the decisions of everything. That television program, the Newsbenders that I brought up a while ago from 1968, where a computer was making all the decisions for the entire world, holds absolutely true. So we are just seeing it's just being revealed slowly and slowly and slowly without the realization of this whole thing is AI. Once it begins, it's a matrix, right? It's a simulated matrix, and it's all AI created, all AI generated, all AI run. But that is the divine spark's great possibility. AI can only go as far as its coding. It's limited. It has a box. AI is not totality, right? The divine spark, that which you are, is totality. So that means it's actually more powerful than this matrix can ever possibly be. So I know a lot of people kind of would say, you have such a negative view of reality and people. And no, I have an unbelievable view, because from the awareness point of the divine spark, everything in the matrix is actually afraid of you. An awake divine spark is frightening to the demiurge, frightening to the demiurge. That's how powerful one's divine spark is. And that's why, should it ever get awakened out of the coma, the journey, the magnificent journey begins, because the matrix cannot hold that power. And it's just something to remind people that I wouldn't be writing these books if I didn't fully believe that the deepest power of what's there within is greater than all of this, and have touched that myself and have had that experience. So that's what I want to share, that there's there's possibility there. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. If it's interesting to you, go find out. Go find out for yourself. Go find out what an awakened divine spark has for power. It's very interesting.
And what's trippy about just even that statement, and we'll leave it with that, is that your divine spark you could have already found that divine spark, and this isn't really, this is just Howdie. You maybe have already made it, but you're still trying to tell us how to get to the divine spark. I know that's trippy and probably the wrong way to look at it, but
the amazing thing is, my divine spark is no different than yours.
For sure.
We're both absolutely the same. It's just, we've forgotten that the power is there, and it's exactly the same power. When I'm doing these talks, I'm not talking to you. The divine spark is talking to the divine spark. That's what the conversation's happening. It's just coming out, words out of a character. And that's, I guess, what I hope happens through the books and these conversations, that maybe some other divine sparks out there hear this message that's for them. It's for it. And it gets somehow back up and running. And that doesn't mean life gets really easy or something. It doesn't mean all your suffering goes away. It doesn't mean you live in some sort of blissful happiness paradise. It just means you're not being fooled anymore. And that's an amazing thing to start experiencing.
Yes, it is. Well, that's we'll probably put it there as a lot of good information. You guys, I highly advise getting Howdie's book, Empty the Cave. I'll put links in the description below. Howdie, I love talking to you. It's always a great time, man. It's very, I enjoy it, man. It's fun. It's food for thought, and and I'm not saying that I'm going to change my life like after the podcast and go do all these types of things, man. But, it really makes me want to, you know what I'm saying? And I can't thank you enough for always doing the podcast, man. And it's just always a blessing.
Thanks again for coming back. And yeah, we have very good conversations, and that's the most important part of being able to do things like this. Is it's not just having an interview where somebody just asks you standard questions off a piece of paper. It's the ability to have a real conversation, because questions that you would have about this material, the people watching this have the same question. So you're able to operate for them, even though they're not actually in the studio with you. And of course, wouldn't that be great? Of course, in a type of world where fly over to the United States and everything's relatively peaceful and calm, and we could have had the conversation sitting there together, and after this gone for a walk and chatted a bit and talked about how Missouri's going to go 10-2 and not get in the playoffs, and have all sorts of conversation.
All right. That would be fun, man. One day I would love to meet you in person. That would be something. Well, yeah. So I just real quick, they can find your book on Amazon and any other places you'd prefer them to buy it, or any of those things?
Oh, I don't prefer by anywhere specific. It just takes a while because the book's only been out a couple of weeks, and it kind of is a slow process to go from store to store to store. So depending where you are around the world, like yeah, if you're in the US, Amazon and Barnes and Noble have it now. I think it's just made it to Indigo if you're in Canada, but in Europe, it might take a little while to get to your normal one in the country that you use. So just give it a few days. But if you go to my website, there's a sample first chapter that you can read there on the information on the book. I also read it on my YouTube channel. You're welcome to go there and hear the audio version of it. And my community, which has been built up over on Locals, has been doing some really great inner work. And a lot of the stuff that I wrote in this book is come out of the interactions with the community over there. So if this material also interests you, I'd also love to have you there and join us in the conversations we have on that channel too. So otherwise, it's just, again, take this in, take it as a possibility. Don't believe it. Don't disbelieve it. Let it percolate in your brain for a little while and see what happens.
Rock on, man. Well, I appreciate you, man. We'll chat soon. And good luck.
Cheers.
Cheers.